Hello everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Tonight we celebrate a couple of things. First, we bid farewell to Season 6, which has been nothing short of amazing. And we'll welcome a new season shortly. Second, it's the beginning of winter. And of course, with winter comes Christmas. With the holiday just around the corner, it seems fitting to sit back and listen to a little holiday horror. For now, we forget about those seasonal feel-good stories and instead, we delve into the darker side of Christmas, where magic takes a back seat and happy endings are not guaranteed. Because yes, even during the most wonderful time of the year, the monsters come out to play. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, my friends. Let's get started, shall we? Today I had lunch with an old friend from college, and our conversation gave me doubts about how I've handled Christmas with my daughter. She basically called me an asshole. I'm starting to worry that she was right, so I wanted to get more opinions. My two kids are 1 and 6, and I never let the 6-year-old believe in Santa. She's always known he isn't real. She still gets the same amount of presents and enjoys the same movies. She's just never sat on Santa's lap or wrote him letters. I've never thought of it as wrong or bad, only different. But now my friend is behaving as if I've robbed her of some childhood rite of passage. I could technically do things differently with my 1-year-old, but the mere thought of doing so terrifies me to my core. The reason I don't want my kids to believe in Santa is because of my own childhood experience, but maybe that isn't fair. I was a cliché, spoiled, only child, so Christmas was my favorite time of year. I always wrote Santa letters, left thank you cards with his milk and cookies, and tried to stay awake at night, but I inevitably fell asleep. Except for one year. When I was 7, I woke up to see Santa coming through our back door. We didn't have a fireplace, so I assumed that's how things worked for kids without chimneys. I was bouncing with excitement, and he rushed over, urging me to be quiet, lest wake my parents. I clamped my hands over my mouth, not wanting to upset him, but I could barely contain myself. He sat on the couch and had me sit on his lap while he ate the cookies and read my thank you card. I remember thinking he smelled bad, but it wasn't enough to set off my alarm bells. Then, when I asked for my presents, he said that he forgot them in the sleigh and invited me to come pet his reindeer. I had to clamp both hands over my mouth, again, to contain the squeal that rose to my lips. Once I regained control, he took my hand and led me outside, where no sleigh waited on the roof. Instead, he took me to an old, beat-up station wagon, parked at the curb. I stopped dead in my tracks, confused and upset. But he said it was disguised with magic. After all, he couldn't very well just leave his reindeer alone on the street, or someone might steal them. To a 7-year-old, that made all the sense in the world. But then he said that he would have to drive me somewhere private in order to release the spell, or someone else might see. I said I couldn't leave without telling my parents, but he knew a place that we could go, just around the corner. He said we wouldn't be gone for more than 10 minutes. I was afraid of getting into trouble, but how could I pass up a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to pet Santa's actual reindeer? I finally agreed to go, and he once again began leading me to this hideous station wagon. But just when he was opening the door for me, a set of bright headlights turned onto our quiet, dead-end street. We were the second house, so it was already close to us when they turned. And I quickly recognized our neighbor's truck because he had the green glow lights along the bottom on each side. Santa let go of my hand and stood frozen, turned away from the lights. I thought they hurt his eyes, but later understood that he was hiding his face. I'm not sure if he was waiting to see what the truck did, or if he was just debating whether or not to snatch me and run. But at the time, I just wanted to show off that I'd met Santa, so I began jumping and waving as I called out, "Mr. Johnson, look, it's Santa!" I knew him well because he often came to our barbecues, and the second I began calling to him, Santa took off running, jumped in the car, and sped away. Mr. Johnson drove all the way into our yard, leapt out of his truck, and ran over to me. I was crying my eyes out, screaming for Santa to come back. I thought that he was mad at me, and now I wouldn't get any presents. Mr. Johnson picked me up, carried me inside where he woke my parents and told them everything. It was total chaos. Police were called, descriptions were taken, and I was informed that there's no such thing as Santa. My parents were even more traumatized than me, and they never wanted to risk anything like that happening again. Our neighbor was praised as a hero, and rightfully so. I still send him a Christmas and birthday card every year, even though he moved to Michigan after I graduated high school. They did catch the guy who tried to kidnap me. He tried to take another little girl from a neighborhood across town. Her parents woke up before he could get her outside, and the father put him in the hospital. He spent some time in jail, but not nearly long enough, and I have no idea what happened to him after that. So yeah, he's the reason I never told my daughter about Santa Claus. I had put serious thought into doing things differently with my son. I've been seeing a therapist for 2 years now, and I've learned better coping techniques for my anxiety. Then my conversation with my friend almost convinced me. Honestly, I'd hoped that sharing this story might have a healing effect, like it would be the last leg of this tiring journey, but I think it did the opposite. There should be no reason my son can't have the same magical holiday experience as my daughter. When it comes to all the things that make Christmas special, Santa is a pretty small piece of the equation. I still welcome and appreciate all opinions, but I may have made up my own mind. Well, thank you for reading anyway, and whatever traditions you celebrate at this time of year, I hope you have the happiest holiday yet. Every Christmas, my parents make me go to my grandmother's house in Mississippi, and I hate sleeping there. They have one of those really old houses from the 1800s, and it's haunted as shit. My grandmother's lived there for over 25 years, and she's so used to it that she doesn't even react anymore. According to her, there's a little boy who died of pneumonia, a woman who died in childbirth, and something mean that she doesn't like. But the way she talks about it, you'd think that it was only an ornery squirrel in her attic. The little boy normally likes to run up and down the stairs and sometimes in the hallways, but when I'm there, he haunts the room I stay in all night. Grandma says he wants to play with me because there's never any other kids around, but I'd rather stick to friends that are living, thank you very much. God, I can already see the comments saying they'd love to play with a ghost. I'm sorry, but most of you wouldn't. You think it sounds cool until you woke up to pounding footsteps running around your bed in the middle of the night, and then you'd be freaked out, just like me. That shit isn't supposed to happen in real life. The woman cries a lot, but only at night and only in the room where she died. Grandma turned it into her craft room because no one can sleep in there. Sometimes she'll go in and stuff will be on the ground from where it fell off the desk or shelf. But that's about it for the woman. She doesn't know anything about the mean one. But she has a theory that it might be a Civil War soldier, because one used to live there. He had a reputation for being just as brutal at home as he was in battle, but he died in Gettysburg. So I'm not sure if he could be haunting the house or how that would work, but again, it's just the only theory she has. He's the one responsible for random cold spots appearing throughout the house, and he enjoys scaring people. Grandma always tells everyone to hold on to the handrails when they use the stairs because he's tried to push her down them on more than one occasion. He also messes with women more than men. Mom gets her hair pulled a lot when we're there. One Christmas, I fell asleep on the couch after opening presents and dreamed that I woke up to see a tall, black shadow leaning over me. I tried to scream, but couldn't. Then it stretched out its hand and scratched my chest. I woke up for real, screaming, and there were actual scratch marks across my chest. They weren't bleeding, but they were raised red welts about 6 inches long. The same thing has happened to Grandma enough times for her to think it wasn't a big deal. Last year we were watching The Grinch on Christmas Eve night, and the only source of light came from the tree and the TV. At one point, I noticed my dad staring at the tree really hard, and I tried to figure out what he could be looking at. Before I could notice anything, a shadowy arm reached out from a larger shadow on the wall and hit one of the ornaments. The glass ball fell to the hardwood floor and shattered, causing everyone else to jump. Dad and I were the only ones to see it, but no one was surprised by what happened. The next night, I almost ended Christmas Day by falling down the stairs myself. I wasn't pushed, but the stairs have a landing halfway up and then turn left. I was paying more attention to my switch than my surroundings, so when I turned, I was just inches away from the shadow figure. I don't even know how to describe what I did. I tried to stop, but it was so sudden that I was already on top of it and nearly fell over backwards trying to scramble away from it. The second I touched it, my body went cold, and I got dizzy and nauseous. I even dropped my new switch. That part really sucked. This incident is the main reason I don't want to go back. It's a whole year later now, but I still remember that awful feeling like it happened yesterday. It's bad enough just being there for a few days, but I don't know how my grandma can stand it. When she wakes up to that thing standing over her, she just screams at it to make it go away, like it's a child misbehaving. I asked if it really obeyed her, and she said, only sometimes. I asked what happens the other times, but she just patted me on the back and said, he gets angry. I'll never understand how she can be so calm about this shit. I'm sorry these examples are all over the place, but I've just kind of been writing down whichever one comes to mind, like the year 2 of Grandma's fingers were splinted because they got slammed in a door, or the time that Dad hurt his knee because something grabbed his ankle on the stairs when he was moving boxes into the cellar. But yeah, I think those are all the big ones. I wish I was one of those people who could enjoy this kind of stuff, but it's just not for me. I love my grandma, but I wish that she would come to our house for the holidays every now and then. I'm gonna end up with PTSD from going to hers. Hell, that's if I don't already have it. Every time we come home, I still spend weeks jumping at every noise while I readjust to being safe. Though I should probably just be grateful that nothing has followed us back. Anyway, thanks for reading and Merry Christmas. May you all have a better one than I'm going to. Okay, I know this sounds really bah humbug for me to say, but I'm ready for this holiday season to end. The only thing I've gotten for Christmas so far is a creepy stalker, so I'm pretty much done. Every year I pick up a little extra money by operating the camera for Santa at the mall. It's extremely easy. The camera sits on a tripod, the kid sits on Santa, and I click the button. The end. Most customers don't even notice me, but this year, one man in particular noticed me way too much. Once Barb takes the customer's money, she sends the kid up to sit on Santa's lap while the parents usually circle like vultures to snap a picture from every angle. Some of them stand a little too close for comfort, but it's usually because I'm invisible, not because they're being creeps. Over the years, I've learned to ignore them right back. Well, a couple of days ago, a little girl was with Santa, and her father stood next to me as he took his pictures. I noticed him after taking my own, and we exchanged the customary polite smiles. But then he didn't move along. Instead, he introduced himself and wished me a Merry Christmas, which I cheerfully returned, only to have him launch into a story about the little girl being his niece. He kept stressing the word as if it were really important that I didn't think she was his daughter. I continued smiling politely, but then Rick went on to explain that he had to bring her to see Santa because his brother was in the hospital with cancer, and the girl's mother had died in childbirth. If that's true, my heart bleeds for the poor girl. But, in my experience, when someone begins blabbing their life story to a stranger in such detail, it's either because they are so overwhelmed that it spills out of them involuntarily, or because they want a pat on the back while you fawn over what a great person they are. Or, of course, it's all a complete lie, because some disgusting man wants to get in your pants. This genuinely felt like the latter. I'm 29, and this guy is pushing at least 50. He also reeked of cigarettes and looked like he hadn't showered in a couple weeks. The little girl, bless her little heart, didn't appear as if she was being cared for properly at all. Her face and clothes were dirty, her hair wasn't brushed, and my chest ached for her. I hated to see Barb give Santa the 30-second warning, but her uncle was creeping me the hell out, and if we let every kid talk as long as they wanted, we would never get to them all. He saw the signal too, and asked if I would have dinner with him after my shift. Not wanting to be overly rude, I simply said that my boyfriend and I already had plans, but that wasn't good enough. An angry look flashed across his face that let me know that he was definitely unstable and not just an awkward man with poor hygiene. He actually argued that I couldn't know who I would like more if I didn't give him a chance. I didn't even try to hide my look of disgust, but he was so lost in his fantasy world he didn't even notice. Thankfully, the mall security guard did. I hadn't even realized it, but I'd been moving backwards as Rick came closer to the point that he was now in front of my camera, and I was out in the customers area. The little girl was finished with Santa and watching us from the exit aisle, and the next kid was waiting for me to take a picture. Once Mike got rid of the weirdo, I explained what happened to Barb, and while I was doing that, Mike came back to share his own concerns. Once they were out of earshot, Rick had told him that I was his girlfriend, and that he was trying to see what time my shift ended. When Mike pretended not to know when I got off, the guy got belligerently angry and demanded that he find out. When I got off an hour later, a different security guard walked me to my car just to be safe, but we didn't see the guy. The next morning, Barb said that Rick had returned 10 minutes before closing and seemed to be looking for me, but left when I wasn't there. I was already freaking out, but then Rick showed up again around lunchtime. He said his niece hadn't been able to finish her wish list yet. To avoid a scene, and because all of our hearts broke for that poor kid, we let them stand in line. But I, quote-unquote, went on break the moment he was close enough to try to speak to me. Mike made it a point to take the pictures for me when I went to the employee break room, and Rick watched me like a hawk through the entire exchange. When it was his turn to go next and I still hadn't come back, he let the person behind him skip the line. Well, Mike, being the awesome guy that he is, wasn't going to play that shit. He very politely explained that I absolutely would not be returning while he was there, and that if he let one more person skip the line, they would be asked to leave and banned from returning. Rick tried the girlfriend story again, but Mike called him out on that too. Then the crazy bastard tried to say that we were just going through a rough patch, but he was here to apologize, and if I only knew that, I would want to talk to him. Rick turned red as a tomato and physically shook with anger as he pulled his niece out of line. She began crying and begging to see Santa one more time, but he kept going without so much as a glance down. I'm glad I didn't have to see it, but I wish so badly that that child didn't have to suffer because of her uncle, or whoever he is to her. Mike got off before my shift ended, but made sure the other security guards knew Rick's face and kept an eye on me. I worked till closing that night. So far, my new stalker hadn't returned, and we hoped that he had been embarrassed enough to just move on. But one of the guards still walked me to my car just to be safe. Jerry is a 45-year-old father of 3 who's been working security jobs for over 15 years, and he saved my life that night. We didn't see anyone, even though we were both looking hard. Everything was still and quiet. My car sat by itself. The closest vehicle to it was 3 spots away, closer to the mall, and nothing on the far end at all. But when we passed that vehicle, Rick leapt from behind it and stabbed Jerry in his side. I've never seen someone move so fast. Jerry grabbed Rick's wrist as he tried to stab him a second time, and there was a sickening snap as he broke the bone and the knife clattered to the ground. Everything happened so fast it was like a blur. Both men were screaming, but Jerry got the psycho on the ground and called for help over his radio. Everyone came running out, and 3 other guys piled on top of Rick while a 4th called 911. This is America, and we aren't filthy rich, so Jerry begged me not to call an ambulance, which I fully understood. I drove him to the hospital myself, and thankfully he's going to make a full recovery. I'd never be able to live with myself if that sweet man died trying to save me. Needless to say, he's getting a fat Christmas ham as soon as I can get the nerve to leave my house again. Rick was obviously arrested, but we're still waiting to see exactly what that process will be. I'm trying really hard not to let this actually ruin my Christmas, but it's not easy. I told my boss that I couldn't work any more shifts this year, and she was very supportive. I don't know if I'll be able to do it next year or not. I guess time will tell. But anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas. Let's take a journey back in time to when I was just a little kid. A memory that I tend to go back to every Christmas, whether I like it or not. Memories are fun that way. So I'll share with you a less than jolly time I had being part of the incredible Toys for Tots program. This is no knock to the program, by the way. Those folks made my Christmases less bleak, for real. Love them. That being said, just imagine stepping into an environment where the air literally crackles with anticipation, filled with that childlike laughter, and in this case, the irresistible aroma of freshly baked cookies. My mom was waiting in line for our cookies while I stood to the side, mesmerized by all the twinkling lights and vibrant decorations, all leading to an even grander area, the stage fit for none other than the jolliest man himself, Santa Claus. This was the first year I remember being excited to see Santa. I'd met him at the mall briefly the year before, but I wanted a redo. My mom told me that I'd seen him years before that too, but this year it felt like I was encountering a rock star. Finally, I was in line, eating my cookies and bouncing with excitement. Clearly, I wasn't the only one. Dozens of anxious kids squirmed with the same anticipation, all eagerly waiting our turn to perch on the big guy's lap and pour out our biggest wishes. I don't know if it was pure childhood imagination, but I swear, I saw an enchanting aura surrounding Santa. I remember thinking, this guy holds the key to happiness. But then, in the blink of an eye, the atmosphere shattered into absolute chaos. The once merry mood transformed into sheer pandemonium as Santa appeared to kneel over, clutching his chest. Santa just had a heart attack in front of dozens of kids. Panic and shock ripped through the crowd like a tidal wave, eventually hitting my mom and I, her face changing from just general mom face to something that I'd never seen before, fear of some kind. It scared me. I switched my view back to Santa and the crowd. All of those gleeful expressions had turned to horror. Everyone looked as scared as my mom. Worried parents fretted over the man in the red suit, shielding the children's eyes, rushing for the exit, carrying and consoling in every direction. I vividly recall the feeling of my mom grasping my hand, her face drained of color, worry etched into every line of her face. and with urgency she swiftly whisked me away from the unfolding scene. She too was shielding me from the distressing sight, though I could still see it. When we left, Santa laid on the ground, motionless. Someone, not an elf but just a regular person, was performing CPR. I didn't know what that was at the time, but I made my mom explain everything. We left the parking lot in a hurry before the arrival of the ambulance, yet the image of Santa clutching his chest, it lingered in my thoughts. So the question started. Had I just seen Santa die? No, of course not. As my mom explained to me, every Santa that I'd ever encountered was merely a decoy, messengers of the true Santa Claus. I hadn't witnessed the final moments of Santa himself. Instead, I'd witnessed a messenger of Santa's experience a life-threatening emergency. My mom reminded me that night that being Santa is no easy task. As a child, I could accept that. I really didn't want to believe Santa had died. Despite the somber note attached to my story, the experience sort of ignited a newfound appreciation for the magic of Christmas when I was a child. Sure, that wore off when I found out the real magic of Christmas. Then the story was just sad. But for a while there, I truly believed that I had this inside scoop into Santa and his workshop of decoys. Here's one for the Yuletide log that we truly don't share enough when my family gathers to tell stories around Christmas time. Probably because the little fiasco almost got me taken away from my dad and put into foster care because of how negligent it made him look as a parent. And so here's the story of how I got to take a magical ride with Santa and one of his elves when they carjacked my dad's Jeep from a gas station parking lot in the early Christmas morning hours of 1994. I was about 5 at the time, and my dad delivered papers for the Seattle Times. He was a single father and couldn't leave me at the apartment unattended for the hours it took him to deliver papers. So he made me a small bed in the back of his Jeep. He rigged it up so that I was still seatbelted in, kind of like a hospital gurney, but homemade with only 3 straps to secure my hip area, chest, and legs. I could still turn and move, but I was secured in at the same time. Pretty ingenious technology. It would be his routine to get a coffee halfway through his deliveries when his favorite 7-Eleven was closest on his route. If I was awake, he'd get me a donut. Most of the time I'd be asleep though. That night, I was asleep. There was snow on the ground, and the temperatures were at their lowest during that part of the night. When my dad got to the 7-Eleven, he left the car on to keep the heater running for me without killing his already unreliable battery. He's never seen the person working behind the register, and while he's purchasing his coffee, she starts to put the moves on him, and they both begin to flirt back and forth. While my dad's distracted by his new Juliet, a man dressed as Santa Claus rides up on his bike. Then, out of the dark, another man rides up beside him, dressed as an elf, minus the pointy shoes. They dump their bikes and briefly talk with each other before slowly approaching the driver and passenger side doors while continuing to scan the parking lot. That's what the building's security camera captured anyway. Change to my perspective. Boom. The doors on both sides of the Jeep swing open. I feel a rush of cold wind hit the top of my head and my feet. Then both doors slam shut, and I hear 2 unfamiliar voices laughing and frantically shouting profanities back and forth. I was quickly slid forward and then backward. I recognized the Jeep was going fast enough for me to feel pressed against the back seats. The harness my dad had built was really being put to the test because Santa drove like a bat out of hell. I woke up confused and scared. I was seeing Santa Claus behind the wheel, and it only furthered my confusion. I could only bend up a little, but it was clearly Santa that I was looking at. I could see even less of the elf, but he was also dressed the part. He was the same size as Santa, and in retrospect, it's funny that their size comparison was the first red flag of something being wrong. Probably still thinking I was dreaming, I go, "Santa?" The front seats get quiet real quick, and I watch his eyes meet mine in the rearview mirror, and he says, "What the fuck?" Then the elf turns and looks at me, then turns to Santa and starts cussing at him, calling him Wayne. I got squeezed and launched forward the 6 inches my harness allowed as the Jeep's brakes slammed. The tires skid to a stop, and the smell of burnt rubber when they open their doors flooded in, and I feel the rush of cold wind enter the vehicle. I hear the doors at my feet open and think Santa's going to unstrap me. Then the door at my head pops open, and I get a closer look at the elf. He's mid to late 30s, thick, bushy eyebrows, blue eyes, brown hair falling from his green, pointy hat. He looked at me and then up at Santa and says a few comments indicating that I may have a disability, and that's why I'm strapped into this contraption so tightly. They would actually be witnesses against my dad in his legal battle later on, telling the state I was leashed in the back of a Jeep like a dog. The men didn't know how to free me, so they unstrapped and pulled apart the actual sleeping board from the seats, with me still harnessed to it. They'd pull the whole thing out and leave me in the snow in some neighborhood by Lake Forest Park. I almost died of hypothermia. Nobody would have thought to look for me separate from the Jeep, let alone in some random neighborhood miles away. Thankfully, the sun was about to be up, and my screams alerted someone in one of the houses who came out to find me in between their recycling bins. I'm currently 36, divorced, and living in Nebraska, but I'm originally from South Dakota and still going back to spend Christmas with my parents. Except after what happened last year, I really don't want to go this year, especially not for the entire week. They left the suburbs for a bigger house in a rural area with lots of woods, and it's beautiful, but it's also friggin' terrifying. At first, I thought not having any neighbors was a plus. But now I'm constantly worried about them being out there all alone with whatever's in those woods. The cell service is shit too, so they can't even reliably call for help without sitting in a window. Last year I went up the Monday before Christmas weekend. It was pretty late when I got there, and right away I knew my parents were acting strange. They were jumping at every little sound and rushing me inside. I wasn't even allowed to unload the car. Dad was in the military for over 30 years. It takes a lot just to rattle him. So to see him actually afraid was truly concerning. But he and Mom kept insisting nothing was wrong. The next morning, they were back to their old selves, so I chalked it up to my late arrival and pushed it from my mind. Until the same thing happened that night as well. It was to the point where I started searching the local news stations to see if there was some kind of serial killer or escaped convict on the loose. But again, I got nothing. Thursday night was my breaking point. After realizing I'd left my charger in the car, I tried to go get it, but I was locked inside. Both doors had locks that could only be opened with a key. When I asked for it, Mom gave me her charger instead. Just to see what they would do, I said I still needed my purse, and they both went rigid. Finally, I threatened to crawl through a window, and Dad said that he would get it himself. Then he opened the coat closet, grabbed his shotgun, and began peering out the windows. If Mom weren't behaving the same way, I would have thought that he was having flashbacks or something. I stopped him from going out. I didn't actually need anything else, and I couldn't stand seeing them both so frightened, but I did give them an ultimatum. Either they came clean, or I left for home first thing in the morning, because I no longer felt comfortable being there. When they finally told me, I didn't know what to think. Mom has always been a little superstitious, and she loves her ghost hunting shows, but Dad mocks anyone who believes in that stuff, like they should be locked in a padded cell. To hear him now say that a monster lived in their woods, that unto itself was terrifying. They had their first experience only 3 days after moving in. One of the main reasons Mom wanted to retire to the country was because she's obsessed with a couple of YouTube channels with raccoons. She planned to leave food by the woods and move it closer to the house as her new friends grew accustomed to her. Anyway, on the third night, Mom looked outside to see if anything had found the food, and she saw something looking at it from just inside the tree line. They hadn't had time to install the floodlights, but it looked to be the size of a raccoon standing up, so she got excited and called Dad over to watch too. Nothing happened for a few minutes, as if it was afraid of stepping into the open, but then the creature they believed to be standing on its hind legs suddenly stretched to its full height. It had only been crouching before, and now the shadowy creature stood taller than a grown man. The clear sky provided just enough light to see that it was definitely covered in fur, and a long arm reached out to pull back a branch blocking its way. Mom screamed, and the figure's head turned towards the house with a low growl before taking off through the woods. Mom believed it was Bigfoot, but Dad thought that it was some jackass in a costume, and he was pissed. He called the police, but they didn't want to send someone as nothing had actually happened, and no one was in immediate danger. The next morning, Dad went to look at the spot where they saw it, and they found huge footprints with only 4 toes on each. He wears a size 12. His own foot was swallowed by this thing's tracks, but what really confused him was how deep they were. If any regular person had worn something in order to make those prints, they wouldn't have been nearly as deep. Likewise, if someone had simply pressed something into the ground, it would have also appeared differently, and the perpetrator would have left their real tracks behind as well. The floodlights went up the next day, but nothing out of the ordinary happened for 3 more weeks. By then, they'd pretty much forgotten about the incident entirely, and Mom had finally gotten a couple of raccoons to come see her each night. Pebbles and Bam Bam wouldn't let her get close yet, but she was working on it. Well, they were showing up at pretty much the same time each night, but now they were suddenly nowhere to be found. Finally, she peeked out of the window and saw the creature eating the raccoon's steak fat and rib bones with its hands, like a person. She managed to stifle her scream and get Dad before it finished. Oh, and don't worry about Pebbles and Bam Bam, though. They went on to have a big family, and they visit all the time, but only when it's actually safe to do so. Anyway, Dad grabbed his shotgun and ran out onto the porch, still thinking that it was a person. He screamed for them to leave, or he would shoot. The creature dropped the food, turned towards him, and let out a guttural growl that sent chills down his spine. Its mouth opened wide to reveal a black tongue and huge yellow teeth. He said it almost looked like a gorilla, except it was built like a person, and it had big bald spots all over, like it had mange. That's when he realized it wasn't a costume, because no human could ever make a sound like that. He raised the shotgun as the creature charged and fired a round directly into its chest, but it just kept coming. He got inside, slammed the door, just as it leapt onto the porch. For almost 20 minutes, it scratched and banged on the door, before finally leaving. Dad called the police again, but knew better than to say they were being attacked by a monster, so he stuck with his costume story. They arrived a few minutes after the creature left, and only then did Dad go back outside. The officers didn't know what to make of the heavy doors, deep gashes, and splintered wood, but they took pictures and made a report. That happened the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and luckily, my parents replaced the door the following day because the creature came back more often after that, like it had a personal vendetta against my dad. So yeah, fast forward to my arrival, and they were pretty on edge by then, but they spent a lot of their retirement money on fixing that place up. They couldn't and still can't afford to move, so they didn't want to worry me. I really don't know what I thought when they first told me. It's such a wild story to take in, especially from your completely normal family, but any doubts I had were completely erased when I saw it for myself on Christmas Eve. It was just like they said. You just can't understand something like that until you've experienced it firsthand. We were opening presents and having a nice night when there was suddenly an awful banging on the side of the house. My mom sat staring into space. Dad hugged his shotgun, and I very quietly snuck a peek out the window. I wish so much that I hadn't, but I needed to know for sure. After 10 or 15 minutes, it left, and I didn't see it again. But I hated leaving my parents there like that. In the years since, they've started putting food right inside the tree line every few days. Sometimes it will eat and leave, and sometimes it'll disappear entirely for months at a time. But they still have the occasional attack, and I'm absolutely terrified of going back. They've gotten so used to it that they just keep insisting it's safe. But I just can't get on board with normalizing this insanity. I know I'll end up going in the end, but it makes me feel better to pretend I might not, and to finally get all of this off my chest, so thanks for listening, and Merry Christmas. Be safe out there, especially if you're traveling. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world. Stay tuned all weekend long for more Christmas horror stories. Don't forget we've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open long enough to find those deep sleep videos, and of course, double features. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of my patrons whom I appreciate so very much. Tracy S, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, The Dark Cosmos, Marion T, Rat Girl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Lissane, Arlene F, and Adrienne. If you want to support the Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining my Patreon, patreon.com/thedarkesthour. Or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.